Okay, good morning, everyone. Now that we've got all the audio set up. So I'm continuing with our series on Count on the Buddha, choosing suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numbered discourses. And this morning, I'm going to read from the Book of Threes. And it's going to be Sutta number 49. And it's called Enthusiasm. And in our spoken chant that we started with, the Noble Eightfold Path, one of the steps was right effort. And that's what the talk is going to be on this morning. And in this particular sutta, there's 4 right efforts. And in this particular sutta, 2 of them are mentioned. So, Anguttara Nikaya, Chapter 3, Sutta 49. Meditators, in 3 cases, enthusiasm should be exercised. What 3? Enthusiasm should be exercised for the non-arising of unarisen, bad, unwholesome qualities. Enthusiasm should be exercised for the arising of unarisen, wholesome qualities. Enthusiasm should be exercised for enduring arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, harrowing, disagreeable, sapping one's vitality. In these 3 cases, enthusiasm should be exercised. When a meditator exercises enthusiasm for the non-arising of unarisen bad, unwholesome qualities, and for the arising of unarisen wholesome qualities, and for the enduring of arisen bodily feelings, they are called a meditator who is ardent, alert, and mindful in order to make a complete end of suffering. Now I'm going to read one more. It's still in the chapter or the Book of Threes, and it's number 54. It's called A Wanderer. And here the Buddha is sharing with us the suffering that happens if we don't put in the enthusiasm to carry out these 4 efforts. So, a wanderer. Then a certain Brahmin wanderer approached the Blessed One and said to him, Master Gotama, it is said, a directly visible Dhamma, in what way is the Dhamma visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise? Brahman, one excited by desire, overcome by desire, with a mind obsessed by it, intends for their own affliction, for the affliction of others, or for the affliction of both, and they experience mental suffering and dejection. But when desire is abandoned, they do not intend for their own affliction, for the affliction of others, or for the affliction of both. And they do not experience mental suffering and dejection. One excited by desire, overcome by desire, with mind obsessed by it. Now, the Buddha says engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. I think it can set you up for that possibility, but certainly doesn't happen every time. They do not understand as it really is their own good, the good of others, or the good of both. But when desire is abandoned, they understand as it really is their own good, the good of others, and the good of both. And it is in this way, Brahman, that the Dhamma is directly visible, to be experienced by the wise. And then the Buddha completely repeats what I just read, but instead of using the word desire, he uses the word hate, and then repeats it using the word delusion. So if we go back to basics, the basic teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths. First truth is that there's suffering in this world. The second truth is that it's caused by desire. The third truth is the good news that we can come to an end of mental and emotional suffering. And the fourth truth is the path that can lead us there. And that's called the Noble Eightfold Path. And so this right effort is step 6 in the Noble Eightfold Path. And its role is to eliminate all these unwholesome states and develop wholesome ones. So, in effect, we're purifying the mind of the causes of suffering. So, this is mental development, or we can call it managing our mind states, or we can call it taking charge of our mental processes. And this is basically the main work of our meditation practice, working to purify the mind states that cause us suffering. Now, earlier steps in the Noble Eightfold Path, they've addressed eliminating behaviors and speech that cause suffering and harm to ourselves. So this step, with the right effort, is purifying our mind, and previous steps have purified our behavior and our speech. Those are steps 3, 4, and 5: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So basically living a moral life. And now we're developing the mind, a much more difficult process. So there are 4 right efforts. The first is to prevent the arising of the unwholesome. And then when it sneaks in, the second step is to eliminate it. And then the third step is to bring into being the wholesome qualities. And then the fourth step is to maintain and enhance those qualities. Now, all of these steps of the Noble Eightfold Path work together. So the step 2, which is right intention, that gives direction to our effort. So right intention is practicing non-ill will. And the opposite of that would be metta, loving kindness. The second right intention is harmlessness. And then the opposite of that would be compassion. And the third right intention is renunciation, living simply. And then step 7 of the Noble Eightfold Path supports right effort, because it has the job of discriminating whether these right intentions are present or not. That is, whether unwholesome or wholesome states are present in the mind. Then step 8 of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is samadhi, the state of stillness and calm, that step's needed to balance the energy needed for right effort. Because if there's too much energy associated with our effort, then we're going to experience agitation and restlessness, which can feel exhausting and lead to discouragement. On the other hand, if there isn't enough energy, then we're going to experience dullness and stagnation, and there's no progress. So we need a middle way of energy. The Buddha gives the story of Sona, a monk who was previously a musician, and he had a very dedicated practice, and he was actually using too much effort. He was doing so much walking meditation that his feet were bloody. And then with all this excess energy or effort that he was making, he wasn't making progress in his practice. So he went to the Buddha. He wanted to disrobe because he wasn't getting anywhere. And the Buddha very wisely said to him, you were a musician, weren't you? And he said, yes. And he said, and when you were tuning your lute, if you tighten the strings too tight, what happened? And it was like, oh, terrible sounding music. And then the Buddha said, well, when you tightened it too loosely, like when you didn't tighten the strings enough, what happened? It was like, oh, it sounded terrible. So he said, just as you needed to tune the strings of your lute just right, then we need to have, our effort in this just tuned right, not too much, not too little. And again, we're using that step 7 mindfulness of the Noble Eightfold Path to assess whether our energy's in balance or not, if it's too excess or too little. So, what do we do if we have too much energy? So, all of my teachers say that if we're feeling this agitation in our practice, we should just sit still, not let our bodies move, and then work on calming our minds or stilling our minds. Now, I think for beginners, this is too high of a bar. This is too difficult to do. So I've always encouraged people who are sort of new on the path, if they're really agitated, to just go out and do jogging meditation or like fast walking or something to just get the body settled down and then come and sit. But we eventually have to be able to sit still, because if we're constantly squirming around, we're not going to be able to come to a state of samadhi. On the other hand, if our energy is too dull, this means we have samadhi without energy, then what we don't want to do is make an effort to concentrate more. We don't need more samadhi at this point. We need more energy. And so then that would be a good time to do walking meditation or open the eyes and let light in or do some exercise. And then once we've generated some energy to start the effort, then the effort itself is going to generate energy. It's also advised not to oversleep or overeat, because that can lead to dullness or low energy. So, keeping this concept of balance in mind, we'll look more closely at the 4 efforts. So the first, as I said, was preventing the arising of the unwholesome. And the unwholesome is basically defined as the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are desire, aversion, restlessness and remorse, dullness and drowsiness, and doubt. The second right effort is when these hindrances have snuck in, then we make an effort to eliminate them. The third effort is if the wholesome states are absent, then we want to cause their arousal. And these wholesome states are usually defined as the 7 factors of awakening. Now, they're not the only wholesome factors. Like, for example, we can think about the Brahma Viharas, the Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, being happy for the happiness of others, and equanimity. And then finally, the 4th effort is if these wholesome states are present, to maintain and enhance them. So the first effort. I think the easiest way to prevent the hindrances is just to be with your meditation object. If you can be completely and fully and continuously with your meditation object, then you're not giving any space for these hindrances to sneak in. But of course, they always manage to do so. So another preventative method is sense restraint. So lack of restraint is when we're going through life with unwise attention to the fault, i.e., unwise attention to what you don't like or what feels wrong with whatever is arising in the present moment. And then the other half of that is unwise attention to the beauty of something, like looking at what you do like, what's attractive in something that's up in the present moment. So sense restraint is not paying attention to these faults or to the beauty. When we're out and about in the world, or when we're in meditation, not paying attention to the thoughts of these that arise in our mind. Now, unwise attention to the fault or the beauty is distorted because we're only attending to one aspect of an object or a situation. For example, we can be very judgmental of ourselves if we only look at our faults and we're not looking at our positive attributes. Okay, another prevention method is to remove yourself from the voice of others if they are arousing unwholesome states. So basically, you don't want to hang out with people who are encouraging ill will and a desire. Another way of preventing is to stop blaming the outside world for how you're feeling, because these unwholesome states, when they arise within us, they're arising within us. And that's because of our reaction to the outside world that we've learned or being conditioned to respond or react to the world. And we can learn to respond or react in a different way, a more wholesome way. We can learn to respond with equanimity or with compassion because we understand that everything that happens is due to causes and conditions. Another prevention is to spend time with our Kalyanamitas, our spiritual friends, those who show contentment, not constantly chasing desires, not focusing on anger. Or we can listen to Dhamma talks that inspire contentment or encourage simplifying our lives or raise our consciousness about the dangers of ill will, anger. Instead, we can focus on the feelings of peace that we develop in our meditation practice. And nicely, the more time we can spend away from the hindrances, the weaker they get. There's an indigenous story of a grandfather talking to his grandson, and he's telling the grandson that we all have these two wolves that live inside of us, and they're constantly in battle with one another. So one wolf represents love, peace, joy, empathy, truth, and kindness. And the other wolf represents greed, anger, envy, resentment, arrogance, and self-pity. And the grandson asks the grandfather, well, which wolf is going to win? And the grandfather said, the wolf you feed. So we have to think about that with our hindrances and factors of awakening. We want to feed the factors of awakening. Now, going back to this concept of sense restraint, how much sense restraint you're going to use in life depends where you are in the path. So it's relatively safe to, focus on a sunset or on beautiful nature because you're not going to go buy them and take them home with you. You can just enjoy them while they're happening. Because not all of us are going to be in the state of renunciation of a monastic who's completely given up receiving happiness or getting happiness from the sensory world. They're just focusing on the peace and happiness that comes from their meditation practice. So you may be choosing to focus on the beauty of a musical concert or the delights of a holiday or something. But if you can see that lack of restraint in your life is causing some suffering, for example, wishing your holiday wasn't over and thus causing suffering for yourself, then you can be motivated to gradually let go of more and more of this, or develop more and more sense restraint. And remembering that the problem with desire is that it's associated with a sense of lack. If you're wanting something that you don't have and you're feeling the lack of that, then you're just feeling not complete, not content. And also remember that fulfilling desires only gives temporary relief. So if we focus on our meditation practice, we're developing contentment and peace and thus removing suffering. Okay, so those are ideas on how to prevent the arising of the unwholesome, the arising of the hindrances. The second effort is the removal of them when they sneak in. And for this, we can look at the middle length sayings, Majjhima Nikaya number 20, where the Buddha talks about the stilling of thoughts. And he gives 5 ways, when these hindrances arise in our mind, to let go of them. So the first one is substitution. So if some thoughts of desire or aversion or the other hindrances arise in the mind, you can just simply go back to your meditation object. So that's the simplest thing to do, is to substitute your meditation object. But if the thoughts are insistent or repetitive, then you can try a specific substitution. So for ill will or anger, you can substitute metta, loving kindness, or any positive emotion. For desire, you can substitute generosity or renunciation. For restlessness, as I mentioned, you can bring in stillness of the body, and then once the body is still, to work on stilling the mind. And for dullness or a feeling of laziness, can do a death meditation, because we don't know when death's going to come to us. My best friend, her son's mother-in-law, perfectly healthy, living a full life, got something, I don't know how she found out, but anyway, she got a cancer diagnosis and was dead in 6 weeks. Or you could walk out of this meditation meeting and be hit by a truck and killed. Like, we just don't know. So if we do death meditation, then that can bring up a sense of urgency and some energy to keep going on our practice. Anyway, if we try all these things and the hindrance is still persisting, then what we can do is focus on their drawbacks, how they can cause suffering. If it's still persisting, then the Buddha says you can ignore it. He said, for example, if you're looking at something and it's generating aversion or desire, then close your eyes and look away. Or another aspect of step 3 here is to distract yourself, like get up and go clean out a closet or a drawer or something, to just distract yourself from this hindrance that's up. If it's still persisting, then the Buddha talks about stepping it down. So he said, if you're walking fast, say, why am I walking fast? Why don't I walk slowly? When you're walking slowly, say, why am I walking slowly? Why don't I stand still? If you're standing still, say, why am I standing? Why don't I sit down? And if you sit down, like, why am I sitting? Why don't I lie down? So one example I thought of for this stepping down is if you're really craving to eat a whole bag of cookies or something, maybe you could say to yourself, I'll have 3. So step it down.
Sure.
And then the final one, which is not a really healthy thing to do, but if nothing else is working, the Buddha says, clench your teeth together, push your lips together, push your tongue up the top of your mouth. And I think this one's most useful if you're angry or something and you're going to say something that's really going to screw up your life, like say something angry to your boss and lose your job, or say something angry to your partner and lose your lose your partner, or saying something angry to a friend and lose your friend, and then clamping down like that and not letting that those words come out. But that's a last ditch effort because you can imagine doing that is not a lot of good tension. Now, really want to emphasize that it's so important in this second effort. Like once the hindrances have come in, when you notice, you do not want to meet the hindrances with aversion, with ill will, with anger, because all of those are a hindrance. And so if you meet a hindrance with a hindrance, you're just doubling the suffering of it. So even though it may feel counterintuitive when a hindrance comes, you in some way you want to sort of welcome it, or have a kindly feeling because you didn't ask for this. It just sort of appeared. And so we want to use these various methods to let it go, but in a kind, compassionate way, feeling compassion for ourselves that we're having this. And so one analogy I thought of is say you're walking down the street and somebody comes up to you and they're lost. Like if we're lost sort of in the hindrances, somebody's lost, and you just, you feel compassion for this person who's not, new to your town, doesn't know their way around, and you just direct them to the, where they want to go to. So we want to have that same compassion with ourselves, and absolutely don't meet your hindrances with more hindrances. Okay, moving on to the third right effort, arousing the wholesome. So as I mentioned, usually the factors of awakening are sort of put in as an example of or a definition of the wholesome. So the factors of awakening are, number one, mindfulness. So just sitting down and being with your meditation object, being mindful of it, you're already arousing the first factor of awakening. The next is investigation of Dhamma. So that's Dhamma basically means reality, like what's true, what's natural. And so one of the aspects of reality is everything has three characteristics. It's impermanent. It's eventually unsatisfactory because it's a negative thing, or unsatisfactory because it's a beautiful thing and then it ends. So it's unsatisfactory in that way. And then this concept of not self, just meaning that we're not some kind of solid, unchanging self. One moment we're sad, one moment we're happy, one phase of our life we're young, another phase we're old. We're constantly changing due to circumstances. Okay, the third factor of awakening is energy. The fourth is joy. And joy has a lot of energy to it. And eventually you get saturated with that, and then it morphs into the next factor, which is tranquility. And I have a little story about this. Many years ago, I was camping in the U.S. on the July 4th, and we were in a fairly small town in the campground, but they're really big on fireworks there. Like here in Canmore, our fireworks, I mean, they're expensive things. They last 5 or 10 minutes. There, it must have lasted about an hour. Anyway, for the first while, it was like, wow, wow, wow. It was really engaging. But after about half an hour, and it hadn't ended, but after about half an hour, I was sort of saturated. Anyway, so that sort of shows how we can morph joy into tranquility. And then the last two factors of awakening are samadhi, the state of stillness and calm, um, characterized by the jhana states, and then finally equanimity, unflappable calm, regardless of what's happening. So now the good thing about these wholesome factors is that they're more natural to our mind than the unwholesome, So when we can let go of the hindrances, then it's natural that our mind sort of inclines to these wholesome states. But if you need some help, then listening to Dhamma talks about these qualities can arouse our interest, and then interest gives rise to joy. So already that's one of the factors of awakening. Ajahn Sona suggests that we use our imagination or our memory to arouse the factors. So remembering occasions in your life that really softened your heart, or memories of being with people who are very uplifting, or memories of someone doing an act of generosity, or forgiving somebody, or helping another. And on the other side of the fence, also noticing when the factors of awakening are there, what pulls you out of them, so you can let those factors go. And then once these factors are arisen, to really reflect on what causes and conditions did you put in to allow them to arise, so you've got a map of how to get back there the next time. Now, remember we talked about balance of energy. So if you're low in energy for arousing these factors, then go for a walk or do yoga, splash water on your face, or do death meditation or something to bring up your energy. Okay, finally, the fourth right effort. This is to maintain and enhance wholesome qualities. So I think you can use the same methods that you use to arouse to now maintain and enhance them. And certainly our samadhi practice, just being with our meditation practice, our meditation object, calming our mind, stilling our mind, that's going to also allow these factors of awakening to arise. Okay, now if you recall back to the first reading that I did, the Buddha gave a third area where we should be enthusiastically working with it. And that's, he talked about enduring physical pain. So now, how I personally understand this is we do what we can to address pain, like take medication if needed, change your posture, do physiotherapy or whatever. But if despite all of this, the pain persists, then we need to experiment with mental ways to endure it. So one suggestion is to, instead of focusing on the pain area of your body, focus on an area of your body that's comfortable. Or you can imagine this comfortable area, the comfort of it gradually expanding and expanding into the area of pain. Another idea is to imagine your mind way out in outer space, looking back at the speck of you on Earth, sort of to make it feel tiny. And then the opposite is to go right into the middle of the pain area and radiate metta to it. So in summary, we're trying to do our best to accept the reality of the pain with metta, loving kindness, compassion, not meeting it with aversion or anger. Now there's pain that's due to some medical issue or some musculoskeletal problem that we have. But we can also arise pain, just with our sitting practice. Like we can sit down totally comfortable, and then after you've been sitting for a while, pain arises. And so I used to have a practice where I just ignored that pain, and it get pretty intense, but I just sat through it. And eventually, I guess your brain just shuts off or something, because the pain would eventually go away, but that would be after 2 hours of sitting. with it. Um, and then I would be left, like the pain would go, I'd continue with my meditation, but it was really dry feeling, like really dull, like really lacking in energy, probably because I'd spent so much energy sitting through this pain. Um, and then I found that when it was my next time to do sitting meditation, I didn't want to do it because I knew I was going to force myself to sit through 2 hours of pain. And so I started to have aversion to my meditation practice. So we really have to experiment. You don't want to be in that kind of a situation where you're just wanting to avoid your practice. And I talked to Ajahn Sona about this, and he said, no more pain. He said, do your meditation practice in a lazy boy, like in an easy chair. So, I mean, for some people, um, it might be fine to just sort of sit through pain, but if you're starting to have a lot of aversion, then it's not a good idea. So again, we have to find some kind of a middle way with this. Okay, that's right effort. So just give me a second here.